The scent of polished mahogany and expensive cologne hung in the air like a warning sign. I shifted uncomfortably on the edge of the leather chair that probably cost more than 3 months of my rent. The waiting room of Salvatore Industries was designed to intimidate. All hard edges, stark minimalism, and a silence so complete I could hear the rapid drumming of my own heartbeat. "Miss Carter." The receptionist's voice cut through the silence. "Mr. Salvatore will see you now." I smoothed down my only decent skirt, navy blue, slightly faded at the hem from too many washes, and gathered my folder of references. This interview was my last hope. 6 months of desperately searching for a job that would accommodate my schedule as a single mother to my 7-year-old daughter, Lily, had left me with dwindling savings and mounting bills. The position of executive assistant at Salvatore Industries promised a salary that could change everything for us. What the polished job description had not mentioned was that Salvatore Industries was a barely concealed front for one of the most powerful crime families in the city. Everyone knew it, but no one said it. At least not out loud. Not if they wanted to keep breathing. "This way, please." The receptionist's heels clicked against marble floors as she led me down a long hallway lined with abstract art pieces that looked simultaneously priceless and utterly soulless. My throat tightened as we approached a set of imposing double doors at the end of the corridor. I had rehearsed my answers all night, memorized my resume, and researched the company's legitimate business ventures in real estate development, but nothing had prepared me for the visceral wave of fear that washed over me as those doors swung open. The office beyond was vast, larger than my entire apartment, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city skyline. Standing at those windows, his back to me, was a man whose very silhouette radiated power. "Sir, Miss Carter is here for the executive assistant interview," the receptionist announced before discreetly backing out of the room. The man did not turn immediately. He remained motionless, hands clasped behind his back, broad shoulders stretching the fabric of what was undoubtedly a bespoke suit. When he finally turned to face me, I had to force myself not to take a step back. Dominic Salvatore was not what I had expected. The newspapers occasionally published grainy photos of him entering courthouses or expensive restaurants, always surrounded by security, his face partially obscured. But those images had not captured the sheer intensity of his presence. He was younger than I had imagined, early 40s perhaps, with sharp aristocratic features, and eyes so dark they appeared almost black in the shadow of his office. His hair, cropped short at the sides but longer on top, was the color of espresso with threads of silver at the temples. A meticulously trimmed beard framed his mouth, which remained set in a hard line as he assessed me. "Miss Carter." His voice was unexpectedly soft with the barest hint of an Italian accent. "Please sit." I moved toward the chair he indicated in front of his massive desk, acutely aware of how I must appear to him. My clothes were clean and professional, but undeniably budget-conscious. My auburn hair was pulled back in a simple knot. My makeup was minimal, the best I could manage while getting Lily ready for school and catching 2 buses to make it here on time. "Your resume is interesting." He settled into his chair, a throne of black leather and chrome. 7 different positions in 5 years. "I have had to prioritize flexibility," I answered, hating the slight tremor in my voice. "I am a single mother." Something flickered across his expression. Surprise, perhaps, or displeasure. "That was not in your file." "It would not affect my performance," I said quickly, sensing the opportunity slipping away. "I have reliable childcare arrangements, and I am extremely organized." A commotion outside the door interrupted me. There was a flurry of hushed voices growing progressively louder, and then the double doors burst open. A small boy raced into the room, followed by a harried-looking woman in her 50s who was clearly struggling to keep up with him. "I am so sorry, Mr. Salvatore," she panted. "He got away from me when I was helping him with his jacket, and he just took off running when he heard voices in here." Dominic Salvatore's entire demeanor transformed in an instant. The cold, calculating businessman vanished, replaced by something softer, gentler. "It is all right, Mrs. Marino," he said, rising from his chair. "Marco, come here, tesoro." The boy, maybe 6 or 7 years old, did not look at his father. Instead, he circled the vast office, his fingers tracing patterns along the wall. He was beautiful with a mop of dark curls and his father's defined features in miniature form. But what struck me most was the focused intensity in his movements. The way his eyes darted across the room, taking in details most would miss. "He has been very upset today," Mrs. Marino explained in a low voice. "He would not eat his breakfast, and he has been reciting all the capital cities since he woke up. I think the change in routine with Rosa leaving has been difficult for him." Dominic nodded, his expression darkening at the mention of Rosa, whoever she was. The boy continued his circuit of the room, making his way closer to where I sat. I remained still, watching him with growing understanding. My neighbor's son had similar behaviors. I recognized the signs. When Marco finally reached my chair, He stopped abruptly. His eyes, unlike his father's, were a startling shade of amber, fixed on my wrist. I followed his gaze to the colorful braided bracelet Lily had made for me last Mother's Day, a chaotic rainbow of threads that I wore every day. 77 threads, Marco said, his voice clear and precise. Red, blue, yellow, green, purple, orange, pink. I smiled, surprised. That is exactly right. My daughter made it for me. She is about your age. It was the first time he looked directly at my face, though his gaze settled somewhere near my chin rather than my eyes. What is her name? He asked. Lily, like the flower. Lilies have 6 petals and 6 stamens, he stated factually. They belong to the family Liliaceae. I nodded seriously. That is right. You know a lot about flowers. I know about everything, he said without a trace of boasting in his tone. It was simply a statement of fact as he perceived it. From the corner of my eye, I could see Dominic watching our interaction with an unreadable expression. The tension in the room had shifted into something else entirely. A strange, expectant silence. Then Marco did something that changed everything. He reached out, not quite touching me, but close, and said with perfect clarity, "Will you be my mom?" The air seemed to vanish from the room. Mrs. Marino gasped, and Dominic Salvatore went absolutely still, his face a mask of shock. "Marco," he began carefully, moving toward his son, but Marco backed away, circling behind my chair. "My mom is gone. Raza is gone. I want her." He pointed at me without looking at me directly. "She smells like cookies and has a flower daughter and knows about lilies." I sat frozen, completely at a loss for words. The interview had veered so far off course that I could not even remember what position I was applying for anymore. "I apologize, Miss Carter," Dominic said stiffly. "My son is on the autism spectrum. He sometimes says things that are inappropriate." "It is not inappropriate," Marco insisted, his voice rising slightly. "It is logical. I need a mom. She is a mom. She can be my mom." I found my voice at last. "It is all right," I said softly. "My friend's son is on the spectrum. I understand." Something changed in Dominic's expression. Then a flash of surprise followed by careful assessment. "Mrs. Marino, please take Marco to the playroom," he said, his tone gentle but firm. "I will come see you shortly, champion." Marco did not protest, but as he followed Mrs. Marino to the door, he turned back and stated with absolute certainty, "She should stay." After they left, an uncomfortable silence descended. I gathered my folder, preparing for the inevitable dismissal. No one got hired after something like this. "I should go," I began. "No." The word was sharp, commanding. Dominic returned to his desk, but remained standing, studying me with new interest. "You said you understand my son's condition." It was not a question, but I nodded anyway. "My neighbor's son was diagnosed 3 years ago. I have helped her research therapies in schools. I am not an expert, but I have learned a lot." He picked up my resume, scanning it with fresh eyes. "You worked at Bright Horizons Childcare?" "Yes. While completing my business degree, I specialized in working with children with special needs." Something calculated crossed his features. "What happened to your daughter's father?" The abrupt change of subject caught me off guard. He left when I told him I was pregnant. "I have not seen him since." Dominic nodded, as if this confirmed something for him. "My son's mother abandoned him when he was 2 after his diagnosis. She could not handle it. My previous assistant, Rosa, had been helping with his care for the past 4 years. Her grandchildren. I was not sure why he was telling me this, but I sensed it was important. It must be difficult for Marco, losing someone he was attached to. "Nearly impossible," Dominic corrected. "My son does not handle change well. He has refused to interact with any of the 3 nannies I have hired since Rosa left. He has not spoken more than 5 words to anyone in weeks." His dark eyes fixed on me with unsettling intensity. "Until you." A chill ran down my spine. I suddenly understood that this conversation had shifted into something far more consequential than a job interview. "The position I am filling is multifaceted," he continued. "Executive assistant, yes, but also someone who can help create stability for Marco when I am handling business matters. Someone he responds to. Mr. Salvatore," I began carefully. "I came here applying for an office position. I am not sure that I am." "Double the salary listed in the advertisement," he interrupted smoothly. "Full benefits, a car and driver at your disposal, and accommodations for your daughter, of course. Private school, tutors if needed." My mouth went dry. The figure he named would solve every financial problem I had since Lily was born. It would mean security, opportunity, and the end of constant struggle. "Why?" I managed to ask. "You do not know me." A ghost of a smile touched his lips, though it did not reach his eyes. I know that my son just spoke more to you in 5 minutes than he has to anyone in a month. I know that you recognized his condition without judgment, and I know desperation when I see it, Miss Carter." His gaze flicked meaningfully to my worn shoes. "We both have something the other needs." The warning bells in my head were deafening now. This was not just a job offer. It was something deeper, more binding. I thought about the rumors surrounding Salvatore Industries, about the men in dark suits who always flanked Dominic in newspaper photos, and about what accepting this offer might really mean. "I would need time to think about it," I said finally. He inclined his head slightly. "Of course. I will have my driver take you home. We can discuss details tomorrow." Before I could respond, he pressed a button on his desk. "Reynolds will see you out. And Miss Carter," his voice dropped, becoming almost intimate. "This opportunity will not be available for long." As if summoned by magic, the office door opened to reveal a broad-shouldered man in a dark suit. Reynolds, presumably, though he looked more like a bodyguard than a chauffeur. Rising on unsteady legs, I gathered my things. As I reached the door, Dominic spoke again. "What is your daughter's full name?" I turned back, puzzled by the question. Lily Grace Carter." He nodded, committing it to memory. "Until tomorrow, Miss Carter." "Emma," I said, not sure why I was offering this information. "My name is Emma." "Emma," he repeated, testing the sound of it. Something possessive flashed in his dark eyes. "Until tomorrow, Emma." As Reynolds escorted me through the building, past the curious eyes of employees who clearly wondered what had transpired in the boss's office, I felt a strange certainty taking root. My life had just veered onto a new and dangerous path, and something told me that Dominic Salvatore was not a man who accepted rejection of any kind. It was not until I was sitting in the back of a sleek black car with tinted windows that I realized my hands were shaking. The driver met my eyes briefly in the rearview mirror before looking away. "Address, Ma'am." I gave him my apartment building's location, then watched the gleaming Salvatore Industries tower recede behind us. In the space of an hour, I had entered that building, desperate for any job that would pay the rent. I was leaving it with an offer that could change everything for Lily and me. All I had to do was enter the orbit of one of the most dangerous men in the city, a man whose dark eyes had already marked me as something he intended to possess. "Mommy, whose car is this?" Lily's eyes were wide with wonder as she climbed into the gleaming black SUV that had arrived precisely at 8 a.m., just as the text message had promised. "It belongs to my new boss," I explained, helping her with her seatbelt while trying to ignore the driver's impassive gaze in the rearview mirror. Reynolds, the same mountain of a man from yesterday, had appeared at our door without a word, simply nodding when I answered. "Is he rich?" Lily whispered, though not quietly enough. I saw the corner of Reynolds' mouth twitch. "Yes, sweetheart," I murmured. "Very rich." The truth was, I still had not fully processed my decision. After a night of pacing my small apartment, weighing impossible choices, I had sent a text message to the number Dominic had provided. "I accept your offer with conditions we need to discuss." His response had been immediate and brief. "Car will collect you and your daughter at 8 a.m. Bring what you need for the day. We will discuss arrangements." As we glided through morning traffic in an expensive vehicle, the reality began to settle. The car probably cost more than I had earned in the past 5 years combined, and the reality settled over me like a heavy cloak. "Where are we going, Mommy? What about school?" "You are going to visit a special place today," I told her, forcing brightness into my tone. "Remember how I said Mommy might get a new job? Well, there is a little boy there who might need our help." Lily brightened instantly. At 7, she was already the most compassionate soul I had ever known. "Is he sick? I can share my colored pencils if he likes to draw." "He is not sick, but he sees the world a little differently." I chose my words carefully. "His name is Marco, and he is about your age. He might not want to play the same way you do with your friends, but I bet he would love to meet you." As the car wove through the city, I noticed we were not heading toward the downtown Salvatore Tower. Instead, we turned onto a tree-lined avenue leading to the exclusive North Hills district, an area I had only seen in magazine spreads about the city's elite. The houses, no mansions, grew progressively larger and more secluded as we drove deeper into the neighborhood. Finally, Reynolds turned onto a private drive flanked by ornate iron gates that swung open at our approach. Beyond stretched a winding driveway bordered by perfectly manicured gardens. "It looks like a castle," Lily breathed, pressing her face against the window. The Salvatore residence was indeed reminiscent of a modern fortress. 3 stories of elegant stone and glass surrounded by grounds that seemed to go on forever. As we approached, I noted the subtle security features. Cameras disguised as landscape lighting, the uniformed men positioned discreetly around the perimeter, and the reinforced windows that probably cost more than a college education. Reynolds pulled up to the front entrance and came around to open our door. "Mr. Salvatore is expecting you in his study." Mrs. Marino will look after Miss Carter while you speak with him. No, I said firmly, surprising myself with my boldness. My daughter stays with me until I have finalized arrangements with Mr. Salvatore. Something like respect flickered across Reynolds' stoic face. He nodded once and led us through massive double doors into an entrance hall that made Lily gasp audibly. I understood her reaction. The space was cavernous with soaring ceilings, a sweeping staircase, and floors of polished marble. Art pieces that belonged in museums adorned the walls, and a chandelier that must have cost a fortune cast prismatic light across everything. This way, Reynolds directed, leading us down a corridor lined with what appeared to be original paintings. We paused outside a heavy wooden door where Reynolds knocked twice before opening it without waiting for a response. Dominic Salvatore stood as we entered, his imposing frame silhouetted against the morning light streaming through tall windows. Today, he wore a charcoal suit that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders, a crisp white shirt open at the collar. He looked like power personified, and entirely out of place in a home with a child. His dark gaze swept over me briefly, before settling on Lily, who instinctively moved closer to my side. "You must be Lily," he said, his voice gentler than I remembered. "Marco has been very excited since I told him you were coming." Lily looked up at me for reassurance. I nodded encouragingly, and she stepped forward with the natural confidence of children. "Do you really live here? It is like a museum." A smile, the first genuine one I had seen from him, briefly transformed Dominic's severe features. "Sometimes it feels that way," he agreed. "Would you like to see the garden? There is a fountain with fish you can feed." Lily's eyes lit up, but she looked back at me questioningly. "Mrs. Marino can show you," Dominic continued, pressing a button on his desk. "While your mother and I talk about grown-up things." Within moments, an older woman appeared, the same one who had chased after Marco yesterday. She smiled warmly at Lily. "Just the garden, please," I said firmly. "I would like her to stay close." Dominic observed this exchange with that same calculating look from yesterday. After Mrs. Marino and Lily left, he gestured to a seating area by the fireplace. "You said you had conditions," he stated, remaining standing until I had taken a seat on one of the leather armchairs. I straightened my spine, determined not to be intimidated. "Before we discuss those, I need absolute clarity about what this position entails, Mr. Salvatore." "Dominic," he corrected, settling into the chair opposite mine. "If we are to share living space, formalities seem unnecessary." "Share living space?" I repeated, my voice sharpening. That was not part of the offer. His expression remained impassive. "Marco needs consistency. The previous arrangement with Rosa involved her living in the East Wing during the week. Your quarters would be considerably more spacious. A full suite for you, another for your daughter, with a private sitting room and access to the garden terrace." My mind raced to keep up. I assumed this was a daytime position. "I have our own apartment, a 2-bedroom walk-up in Parkside Heights," he interrupted smoothly. "3rd floor, no elevator, questionable security." "I have seen it." A chill ran through me. "You have been to my home." "I have had it evaluated," he clarified as if this were completely reasonable. "Along with your financial situation, your daughter's school records, and your former employers. I am thorough, Emma, especially when it concerns my son's well-being. The casual invasion of privacy should have angered me, but I was not naive enough to be surprised. This was a man accustomed to complete control. "Then you know I have nothing to hide," I replied evenly. "But living here, that changes the nature of the position considerably." "It does," he agreed, "which is why the compensation reflects that reality. 6 figures plus expenses, education for your daughter at North Hills Academy, and complete security." His eyes held mine. No more struggling to make rent, no more choosing between paying bills and buying new shoes for Lily. The accuracy of his assessment stung. Last month, I had indeed postponed paying the electric bill to buy Lily new sneakers when her old ones had fallen apart. What exactly would my role be? I asked, forcing myself to focus on practicalities. "Officially, you will be my executive assistant, managing my calendar, correspondence, household affairs, and some aspects of my legitimate business interests." The emphasis he placed on legitimate was not lost on me. "Unofficially, you will help provide Marco with the stability he craves. He responded to you in a way I have not seen since Rosa left." "I am not a nanny," I pointed out, "or a therapist." "No," he agreed. "You are something rarer, someone my son connected with instantly. His therapist has explained that sometimes autistic children form inexplicable bonds with certain people. Marco has chosen you." His expression hardened slightly. "I will do anything necessary to help my son thrive, Emma. Anything." The implication was clear, including bringing a complete stranger and her daughter into his home based on his son's reaction. "My conditions," I said, returning to my original purpose. "First, I need a formal employment contract outlining all expectations and compensation. Second, while I am willing to live here on weekdays, Lily and I will spend weekends at our own place. We need some independence. Dominic considered this, fingers steepled. Weekends can be negotiated after Marco adjusts to the new routine. What else? My work will remain within appropriate professional boundaries. I will not be available 24/7, and I need dedicated time with my daughter. I took a deep breath before adding, and I want complete transparency about what I am getting into. I know Salvatore Industries is not just a real estate development company. His expression did not change, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. Careful, Emma. I am not asking for details, I clarified quickly. But I need to know that my daughter and I will not be exposed to anything illegal or dangerous. For a long moment, he simply studied me, his gaze so intense, I had to force myself not to look away. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and deliberate. My home is separate from my business interests. Your duties will never intersect with certain aspects of those interests. You and your daughter will be under my protection at all times, which means you will be the safest two people in this city. He leaned forward slightly. But you need to understand something fundamental. Once you enter my household, you accept my authority within these walls. I protect what is mine, Emma, without exception or compromise. The possessive undercurrent in his words sent a shiver down my spine. There was a boundary being drawn, but also a line being crossed. By accepting his offer, I would be placing Lily and myself under the control of a man who clearly viewed the world as divided into two categories, things he owned and things he did not. We are not yours, I said carefully. We would be your employees. His smile was thin. Of course. Before I could respond, the door burst open, and Marco rushed in, followed closely by Mrs. Marino and Lily, who looked concerned. I am sorry, sir, Mrs. Marino panted. He saw them from the upstairs window and insisted on coming down. Marco circled the room in the same pattern I had observed yesterday, his fingers trailing along the wall, his eyes darting everywhere except directly at any of us. Finally, he stopped several feet from where I sat. You came back, he stated flatly. With a flower daughter. I smiled gently. Yes, Marco. This is Lily. Lily, bless her, knew instinctively not to approach too quickly. She gave a small wave. Hi, Marco. I like your house. Marco did not respond directly. Instead, he addressed me again. Will you stay in the blue rooms? I glanced at Dominic, who was watching the interaction with intense focus. The East Wing suite, he explained quietly. The walls are blue. I am thinking about it, Marco, I answered honestly. Marco's hands began to flutter at his sides. A self-soothing gesture, I recognized. The blue rooms are good. They are next to my rooms. Rosa was there, but she left. She said goodbye, but she still left. The naked hurt in his voice was painful to hear. I saw Dominic's jaw tighten, a flash of helplessness crossing his features before he controlled it. Sometimes people have to leave even when they do not want to, Lily said suddenly, her voice gentle. My teacher, Mrs. Peterson, had to move because her husband got a new job. She cried when she said goodbye to our class. Marco's movement stilled slightly. Did she come back? No, Lily admitted, but she sends our class postcards from her new city. My mom put mine on our refrigerator. For the first time, Marco turned partially toward Lily. We do not put things on refrigerators. Dad says it is cluttered. Lily shrugged. We could put them somewhere else, like a special book. I have 17 special books. Marco informed her with the first hint of animation I had heard in his voice. For different categories of special things. Can I see them? Lily asked, her interest genuine. Marco looked momentarily conflicted, then nodded. Mrs. Marino has to come and Emma too. He paused, then added as if just remembering. And Lily. As the children moved toward the door with Mrs. Marino, I rose to follow them. Dominic caught my wrist as I passed. His grip was firm but not painful. You see, he murmured, his voice too low for the others to hear. He needs this. He needs you. His dark eyes held mine. And in them I saw something unexpected. Not the cold calculation of a business transaction, but the desperate plea of a father who would do anything for his child. We have a deal, Emma. It was phrased as a question, but we both knew it was not one. Not really. The choice had been made the moment Marco had connected with me, perhaps even before that, when Dominic had recognized the desperation in my eyes that mirrored his own. We have a deal, I agreed quietly, knowing I had just tied my fate to the Salvatore household in ways I could not yet fully comprehend. He released my wrist. Satisfaction. Welcome home, then. As I followed the children from the room, I could not shake the feeling that I had just made a deal with the devil himself. A devil in an expensive suit who looked at me with eyes that promised both protection and possession. 3 weeks passed in a blur of adjustments and revelations. Living in the Salvatore mansion was like inhabiting another world, one with its own rules, rhythms, and hierarchy. Every morning, I woke in a bedroom larger than my entire apartment, surrounded by luxury that still felt foreign against my skin. My duties as Dominic's executive assistant were challenging, but manageable. I organized his legitimate business schedule, handled correspondence, and coordinated with his various property managers and investment advisors. If there were meetings I was not meant to know about, they happened elsewhere, conducted by men who arrived in dark SUVs and disappeared into Dominic's private study. Today marked the third consecutive Saturday that Lily and I had failed to return to our apartment for the weekend. Each time, a convenient obstacle arose. Marco had a meltdown at the suggestion. Dominic often required my presence for an important business brunch. Most effectively, Lily herself begged to stay, stating Marco needed to finish showing his rock collection. I stood at the window of my suite, watching the children in the garden below. Marco was methodically arranging a series of leaves by size, while Lily sat nearby, asking questions about each one. Their unlikely friendship had blossomed with surprising speed. My daughter, with her natural empathy, had adapted to Marco's needs without complaint, learning when to give him space and when to gently draw him out. They look happy. I startled at Dominic's voice behind me. He moved so quietly for such a large man, appearing in doorways without warning. Over the weeks, I learned this was one of his many unsettling habits. Other habits included recalling every word of our conversations and watching me when he thought I was unaware. They do, I agreed, not turning from the window. Marco showed Lily how to use his special magnifying glass. She has been collecting bugs for him to identify all morning. Dominic moved to stand beside me, close enough that I could smell his cologne, something expensive and subtle that I had come to associate with his presence. Like everything about him, it was both appealing and intimidating. "You have not mentioned returning to your apartment this weekend," he observed casually. I finally turned to face him. "Would you allow it if I did?" His expression hardened slightly at my choice of words. "You are not a prisoner, Emma. Aren't I?" The question slipped out before I could stop it. 3 weeks of careful diplomacy, of tiptoeing around the power dynamics between us, and suddenly I was confronting him directly. Surprise flickered in his dark eyes, quickly replaced by something more calculating. "Is that how you feel?" I searched for the right words. "Absorbed. Like Lily and I are being gradually incorporated into your world on your terms, with less and less of our former lives remaining." He did not deny it. Instead, he moved to the sitting area of my suite and lowered himself into an armchair, gesturing for me to join him. After a moment's hesitation, I did. "You agreed to live here weekdays," he reminded me. "The weekends have been circumstantial." "Have they?" I challenged. "Nothing in this house happens by accident, Dominic. I have watched you operate for 3 weeks now. You orchestrate everything." A smile played at the corners of his mouth. "Not everything. I did not orchestrate Marco's attachment to you or your daughter. That was unexpected. It was the closest thing to vulnerability I had seen from him. In the weeks I had been here, I had observed Dominic Salvatore in many roles: ruthless businessman, feared boss, protective father. But there were moments, brief and rare, when I glimpsed something else beneath the controlled exterior. A man haunted by his inability to give his son what he needed most. "He is making remarkable progress," I said, softening my tone. "His therapist said he is more communicative than she has seen in months." Pride and something like relief crossed Dominic's features. "Because of you and Lily. Because he feels secure," I corrected. "We are providing consistency, which is why disrupting that consistency with weekend departures seems counterproductive." And there it was, the negotiation I had been expecting. Dominic never made direct demands. He created circumstances that led inevitably to his preferred outcome. "We need some separation," I insisted. "Some reminder of our own identities apart from this household." Dominic studied me with that penetrating gaze that seemed to see straight through my defenses. "What are you afraid of, Emma? That you will forget who you were before? Or that you will prefer who you are becoming?" The question struck uncomfortably close to truth. Each day in this gilded world made my previous life seem more distant, more difficult to return to. The constant struggle, the endless worry about money, the exhaustion of doing everything alone, all replaced by comfort, security, and most disturbingly, the growing awareness of Dominic's constant attention. "I am afraid of losing myself," I admitted quietly. "And yet," he replied, his voice equally soft, "I see you becoming more yourself each day. More confident, more assertive. Even now, confronting me in a way few people would dare." Before I could respond, a commotion erupted from the garden. We both turned to see Marco in full meltdown, his hands over his ears, body rocking back and forth. Lily stood nearby, looking distressed, but not approaching him. exactly as I had taught her. Without another word, we both rushed downstairs and out to the garden. Mrs. Marino was already there attempting to calm Marco, but his distress only seemed to be escalating. "What happened?" Dominic demanded, his voice sharp with concern. "A gardener started using the leaf blower on the other side of the hedge," Mrs. Marino explained. The noise triggered him. Dominic immediately pulled out his phone, barking orders for the gardening to stop. I approached Marco slowly, kneeling a few feet away from him. "Marco," I said softly, "let us count together. 1, 2, 3. He continued rocking, but his frantic movement slowed slightly at the sound of my voice. 4, 5, 6. I continued steadily. 7, 8, 9. He joined in, his voice strained but present. By the time we reached 30, his breathing had calmed. By 50, his hands had come down from his ears. By 75, he was sitting still, though his eyes remained fixed on the ground. "I do not like the leaf blower," he said finally. "It is 92 decibels. Too loud. Makes my head hurt." "I know," I soothed. "It has stopped now. Your dad made it stop." Marco glanced briefly at Dominic, who stood watching us with an unreadable expression. "Dad makes everything stop when it is bad." There was something in the simple statement that squeezed my heart. For all his faults, Dominic's devotion to his son was absolute. I had seen it repeatedly over the past weeks. How he rearranged multi-million-dollar business deals to attend Marco's therapy sessions. How he had memorized every detail of Marco's condition. How his voice changed to infinite gentleness when his son was distressed. "Would you like to go inside now?" I asked Marco. "We could organize your shell collection in the library." He nodded, standing up and automatically reaching for my hand, a gesture that had developed naturally over our time together. As we walked past Dominic, Marco surprised us all by reaching for his father's hand as well, creating a momentary chain of connection between the three of us. Dominic's face registered shock before settling into something warmer, more open. Our eyes met over Marco's head, and in that moment, something shifted between us. An acknowledgement of the strange family unit we were inadvertently forming. Later that evening, after both children were asleep, I found Dominic in his study. The room had become familiar to me now. The wall of books he actually read, unlike the decorative volumes in other parts of the house. The antique chess set perpetually set up mid-game. The photos of Marco at various ages, the only personal touches in his otherwise austere workspace. "He is sleeping peacefully," I reported, lingering in the doorway. "The weighted blanket helps." Dominic nodded, setting aside the document he had been reviewing. "Thank you for earlier." I entered the room fully, taking the chair across from his desk, my usual spot during our evening debriefs. "It is getting easier to recognize the signs before a full meltdown. You have transformed his world," Dominic said quietly. "Both of you have." The sincerity in his voice was disarming. These moments of genuine emotion from him were rare, and always caught me off guard. "He has transformed ours too," I admitted. "Lily has never had anyone she considers a sibling before. She told me yesterday that she thinks of Marco as her brother now." Something flickered in Dominic's eyes. Satisfaction, perhaps, or triumph. "And what do you think of us, Emma?" After 3 weeks in our home, the question hung between us, loaded with implications. What did I think of this arrangement? Of Marco? Of Dominic himself? I chose my words carefully. I think Marco is an extraordinary child who deserves all the support and understanding in the world. I think this job is both more challenging and more rewarding than I anticipated. And I hesitated. "Go on," he prompted, leaning forward slightly. "I think you are more complex than I initially believed," I finished. "More than just the feared businessman or the crime boss that people whisper about." His expression revealed nothing. "What do they whisper about me, Emma?" My heartbeat quickened. We had never directly discussed the darker aspects of his business empire, maintaining the polite fiction that Salvatore Industries was merely an aggressive real estate development company. "They say you are dangerous," I said honestly. "That crossing you is a death sentence. That you control half the city through fear and the other half through money." He did not deny it. Instead, he rose from his desk and moved to pour 2 glasses of whiskey from the crystal decanter on the sideboard. He handed one to me before taking the chair beside mine rather than returning to his desk, a deliberate closing of distance. "And do you fear me, Emma?" he asked, his voice dropping to that intimate register that always sent a shiver through me. I should have said yes. Any sane person would fear Dominic Salvatore, but 3 weeks in his household had complicated everything. "I fear what you represent," I answered truthfully. "The power you hold over our lives now. But no, I do not fear you personally. Not anymore." He took a sip of his whiskey, his dark eyes never leaving mine. "Explain the difference." "I have watched you with Marco," I said simply. "No man who loves his son with such devotion, who shows such patience and tenderness, could be the monster people describe. You are dangerous. Yes, ruthless in business. Certainly. But there is more to you than that. Something shifted in his expression, a softening around the eyes, a slight release of the perpetual tension he carried. Few people see beyond the surface, Emma. Few try to. I have had 3 weeks of watching you when you do not think anyone is looking, I replied. I have seen you sitting by Marco's bed after he has fallen asleep. I have seen how you check his favorite foods are always available, how you memorize his therapist's recommendations, and how you have redesigned parts of this house to accommodate his sensitivities. Dominic looked momentarily disarmed, as if unused to being observed so closely. A man's true character is revealed in how he treats those dependent on him, he said finally. My father taught me that. It was the first time he had mentioned his father, or any family beyond Marco. Your father, I repeated carefully. Was he also in the family business? A shadow passed over Dominic's features. My father built everything I now control. He came to this country with nothing and carved out an empire through sheer force of will. He swirled the amber liquid in his glass. He was a hard man, but an honorable one in his way. He lived by a code. And you follow that same code with modifications, he allowed, the corner of his mouth lifting slightly. The world has changed. Business has changed. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of unspoken truths between us. I knew I was being granted a rare glimpse behind his carefully maintained facade. The weekend, he said abruptly, returning to our earlier conversation. Take Lily to your apartment tomorrow if that is what you need. Reynolds will drive you and remain nearby for security. The sudden concession surprised me. Thank you. But Emma, he added, his tone hardening slightly, be back by Sunday evening. Marco has therapy Monday morning. He will need you here. It was not really a request, despite being phrased as one. The reminder of Marco's needs, his genuine need for stability, was Dominic's most effective leverage. We will be back, I promised, rising from my chair. As I reached the door, I turned back. Dominic? He looked up, eyebrow raised in question. This arrangement between us, it is becoming something neither of us anticipated, isn't it? For once, his expression was completely unguarded, revealing a complex mixture of satisfaction, weariness, and something deeper I was not ready to name. Yes, he acknowledged simply. It is. As I made my way back to my suite, I could not shake the feeling that my life was balancing on a knife's edge. Every day spent in the Salvatore household drew me deeper into their world, blurring the boundaries I had tried so carefully to maintain. The weekend away would be a test, not just for Marco, but for me as well. Could I still fit into my old life? Or had 3 weeks under Dominic Salvatore's roof already changed me irrevocably? It is so small. Lily stood in the middle of our apartment, her voice filled with wonder rather than disappointment. After 4 weeks in the Salvatore mansion, our modest 2-bedroom home seemed to have shrunk in her eyes. This is our real home, I reminded her gently, setting down the overnight bag on our worn couch. The familiar scent of the lavender plug-in I always used welcomed me back. Yet somehow it felt foreign now. Reynolds had driven us here in silent efficiency, helping with our bags before taking up position in a black SUV across the street. A constant reminder that we were not truly free of Dominic's watchful eye, even here. Can we take Marco here someday? Lily asked, wandering into her bedroom to check on her toys. I want to show him my butterfly collection. I followed her, leaning against the doorframe. Maybe. It might be overwhelming for him, though. New places can be difficult. Lily nodded with the solemn understanding she had developed since meeting Marco. We would need to show him pictures first and tell him exactly what to expect and bring his comfort items. My heart swelled with pride at her thoughtfulness. In just 1 month, my daughter had learned more about compassion and adaptation than many adults ever did. Are you happy at Mr. Salvatore's house? I asked, watching her carefully as she reacquainted herself with her stuffed animals. She considered the question with surprising maturity. Marco needs me, she said finally. And the house has a garden and a library, and my new school has a science lab. She hugged her favorite teddy bear. But I miss our Saturday pancakes here. We can still make pancakes, I promised. We brought the ingredients. As we moved to the kitchen and fell into our old Saturday morning routine, I tried to recapture the feeling of our life before Dominic Salvatore, the simple pleasures of our modest existence. Movie nights on our sagging couch, bubble baths in our tiny tub, and the freedom of answering to no one but ourselves. But the shadow of the Salvatore mansion lingered. I found myself reaching for kitchen tools that were not there, missing the spaciousness, and noticing the water stains on our ceiling that I had once accepted as just part of life. After breakfast, we spent the day reacquainting ourselves with our neighborhood, the small park 2 blocks away, the ice cream shop on the corner, and the discount bookstore where we used to spend hours browsing. Yet everywhere we went, I found myself glancing over my shoulder, aware of Reynolds' presence nearby, wondering if there were others watching us too. By evening, Lily was yawning despite her insistence that she was not tired. "Can we call Marco to say goodnight?" she asked as I tucked her into her familiar bed. "Tomorrow," I promised. "It is getting late now." When she was asleep, I sat alone in our small living room, nursing a glass of cheap wine, a far cry from the aged whiskey Dominic had shared with me last night. My phone buzzed with a text message. All well. Just that. No name needed. In the month I had known him, Dominic had never sent a superfluous word in any communication. "Yes, Lily is asleep. We had a good day." I hesitated, then added, "It feels strange being back." His response came quickly. "Define strange." I stared at the screen, considering how honest to be. "Smaller. Like we have outgrown it somehow." There was a longer pause before his reply. "Perhaps you have." The simple statement carried the weight of everything unspoken between us. The life he offered, versus the independence I clung to. The growing attachment not just between the children, but between all of us, forming connections I had not anticipated. My phone buzzed again. "Marco asked for you at bedtime. I told him you would be here tomorrow." The message was not meant to make me feel guilty, but it did. I pictured Marco in his carefully designed bedroom, surrounded by his collections, missing the routine we had established. "We will be there," I replied. "I know," came his immediate response. Nothing more needed to be said. I set my phone aside and moved to the window, peering through the blinds at the street below. Reynolds' SUV remained in position, a dark sentinel against the night. For the first time, I wondered if his presence was less about monitoring us and more about protection. The thought should have been comforting. But instead, it raised questions I had been avoiding. What dangers lurked in Dominic Salvatore's world that required such vigilance? What enemies had I potentially inherited by association? And most troublingly, why did the thought of returning to the mansion tomorrow fill me with something dangerously close to relief? Sunday morning brought an unexpected development. I was packing our overnight bag when my phone rang. Dominic was calling rather than texting. "There has been a situation," he said without preamble, his voice tense in a way I had never heard before. "Reynolds will bring you back now." "What has happened?" "Is Marco all right?" "Marco is fine," he assured me. "This is a business matter. I need you here." The request, no demand, should have irritated me. I had been clear about having this weekend away, but the strain in his voice triggered something protective in me. "We will be ready in 10 minutes, I said, already moving to gather Lily's things. "Emma," he paused. "Thank you." The simple gratitude was so unexpected from him that it stopped me in my tracks. In the month I had known Dominic Salvatore, he had commanded, negotiated, and maneuvered, but never thanked. Reynolds drove with unusual urgency, his normally impassive face set in grim lines as he navigated through Sunday traffic. Lily sensed the tension, remaining uncharacteristically quiet in the back seat. When we arrived at the mansion, the usual calm efficiency of the household was disrupted. Security personnel I had never seen before patrolled the grounds, and Dominic's inner circle of advisors, men I typically only glimpsed at scheduled meetings, moved purposefully through the corridors. Mrs. Marino met us at the entrance, quickly ushering Lily upstairs to join Marco, who was apparently engrossed in a new documentary about deep-sea creatures, blissfully unaware of whatever crisis was unfolding. "Mr. Salvatore is in his private study," she told me. Her usual warm demeanor was replaced by barely concealed anxiety. The private study was different from the main office where I usually worked with Dominic. Located in a secluded wing of the mansion, it was a space I had never been invited to enter. Two men in dark suits stood guard outside, nodding respectfully as they stepped aside to let me pass. The room beyond was smaller than I had imagined. Its walls were lined with security monitors rather than books. Dominic stood at a large table covered in papers, surrounded by three men I recognized as his most trusted lieutenants. He looked up as I entered, his face hardening into the cold mask I had not seen since my early days in the household. "Wait outside," he commanded the others, who filed out wordlessly, closing the door behind them. Once we were alone, Dominic's posture changed subtly, a slight loosening of his shoulders, a softening around his eyes. "I apologize for cutting your weekend short. What has happened?" I asked, approaching the table cautiously. He studied me for a moment, clearly debating how much to reveal. "How much do you know about my business rivals?" "Only what people whisper about," I admitted. "The Cardano family controls the eastern districts. There is supposedly an uneasy truce between your organizations." A hint of approval crossed his features. "You pay attention. Good." He gestured to the papers on the table, what appeared to be surveillance photos and documents. "The truce has been compromised. Vincent Cardano's son, Anthony, has made a very foolish decision." I glanced at the materials spread before us, careful not to touch anything. "Why am I here, Dominic? This clearly is not executive assistant territory." "No," he agreed, "but it affects the household. which means it affects you and Lily. I needed you here where I can ensure your safety. The implication sent a chill through me. Are we in danger? His eyes met mine, unflinching. Potentially. Anthony Cardano has been surveilling this property for weeks. My security team intercepted one of his men last night near the perimeter. My heart began to race. Marco and Lily are completely protected, he cut in firmly. I have tripled security and they will remain inside until this is resolved. Which brings me to why I needed you specifically. He slid a document toward me. What appeared to be an invitation to a charity gala scheduled for the following evening. The Westlake Foundation annual benefit, I read. What does this have to do with your situation? Vincent Cardano will be there, Dominic explained. As will I. It is neutral territory, a public event with too many influential witnesses for any overt conflict. It represents an opportunity to address this situation diplomatically. I looked up from the invitation. And my role in this diplomacy? You will accompany me, he said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. As my partner, the word hung between us, loaded with implications. Your partner? I repeated carefully. You mean as your assistant? No. His expression remained impassive. As the woman in my life, my companion, I stared at him, speechless. In the month I had lived under his roof, Dominic had been unfailingly professional, despite moments of personal connection and the undeniable tension that sometimes crackled between us. This was crossing a boundary we had both carefully maintained. Why? I managed finally. Because Vincent Cardano is traditional to the point of antiquity, Dominic explained. He respects family men. He disdains those who appear isolated, seeing them as having nothing to lose. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. The fact that his son has been watching this house means he knows about you and Lily. Your presence by my side sends a message about where my priorities lie. Using us as props in your mafia power play, I said, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. Dominic's expression hardened, using the truth to protect what matters to me. He moved closer, his voice dropping. This is not a deception, Emma. Marco adores you and Lily. You have become essential to this household. To him, he paused meaningfully. To me. I took an involuntary step back, overwhelmed by his intensity and the implications of his words. Dominic, I work for you. We live here because of an arrangement. An arrangement that has evolved, he interrupted. Do not pretend you have not felt it, too. He was right, and that was the most terrifying part. Something had been building between us. In quiet moments after the children were asleep, in the way his eyes followed me across rooms, and in the growing ease of our conversations. I attributed it to proximity, to the artificial intimacy of shared living space, but it was more than that, and we both knew it. Even if that is true, I said carefully, using those feelings, whatever they may be, as part of your business strategy crosses a line. My business and my personal life have never been separate entities. Emma, he replied, his voice gentler than I expected. Everything I do protects my family. Marco. And now, by extension, you and Lily. The word family struck me like a physical blow. Is that what we had become in his eyes? I need to check on Lily, I said, needing space to think. He nodded, recognizing my need for retreat. The gala is tomorrow evening at 8. I have arranged for appropriate attire to be delivered. When I opened my mouth to protest, he held up a hand. Consider it a business expense. Your presence may help prevent a war. The gravity of his statement was not lost on me. This was not just about appearances or strategy. There were potentially lethal stakes involved. I will go, I conceded. But I am not pretending to be something I am not. Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. I would never ask you to pretend, Emma. I only want you to acknowledge what is already true. I left the study without responding, my mind racing as I navigated the suddenly unfamiliar corridors of what had become our home. The boundary between employee and something more personal had been dissolving for weeks, but I had refused to acknowledge it. Now Dominic had forced the issue, using external threats to accelerate a confrontation I had been avoiding. Upstairs, I found Lily and Marco exactly as Mrs. Marino had described, side by side on Marco's bed, transfixed by underwater footage of bioluminescent creatures. Their peaceful obliviousness to the dangers swirling around them made my chest ache with a fierce protectiveness. Mom, Lily exclaimed when she saw me. Marco is teaching me about anglerfish. They have lights on their heads to trick other fish. That is fascinating, I said, forcing a smile. Are you too hungry? It is almost lunchtime. As I led them downstairs to the kitchen, I caught sight of Dominic in the main hallway giving instructions to his security team. Our eyes met briefly across the distance, and in that moment I understood something fundamental about him and about myself. For Dominic Salvatore, there were no half measures. People either belonged to him completely or not at all. He protected what was his with absolute dedication and ruthless efficiency. And somewhere along the way, in his mind, Lily and I had crossed from employees to something he considered his to protect. The truly terrifying realization was not that he felt this way. It was that part of me welcomed it. The dress Dominic had arranged for me was a masterpiece of understated elegance, deep emerald silk that draped perfectly, neither too revealing nor too conservative. The stylist who arrived that afternoon to assist with hair and makeup explained it had been custom-made overnight, which seemed impossible until I remembered who had ordered it. For Dominic Salvatore, the impossible simply required sufficient motivation and money. As I descended the grand staircase that evening, I felt like an imposter playing a role in someone else's life. The woman reflected in the hallway mirrors, hair swept up in an elegant chignon, diamonds glinting at her ears, moving with newfound grace in designer heels, seemed a stranger to me. Dominic waited at the bottom of the stairs, a study in monochromatic perfection in his black tuxedo. His expression as he watched me approach was nothing short of possessive, dark eyes tracking every movement with an intensity that made my pulse quicken. "You look beautiful," he said simply when I reached him. "Thank you," I replied, accepting the compliment without deflection. Tonight was not about maintaining professional distance. Tonight was about survival and strategy. Before we left, we went to say goodnight to the children. Marco and Lily were in the media room with Mrs. Marino engaged in what had become their evening ritual of documentary watching. Marco's face lit up when he saw us, or more accurately, when he saw me. "You look different," he observed, his head tilted slightly to the side. "But still, Emma," I confirmed with a smile. "We are going out for a little while, but we will be back after you are asleep." Marco processed this information, his fingers tapping rhythmically against his leg. "Mrs. Marino will stay, and Reynolds is outside and the other men with guns." My eyes widened slightly at his matter-of-fact assessment. Sometimes I forgot how observant he was, noticing details others missed. "That is right," Dominic said smoothly. "Everyone is safe here." Lily rushed forward to hug me, careful not to wrinkle my dress. "You look like a princess, Mom," she whispered. "Be good for Mrs. Marino," I told her, kissing the top of her head. "We will not be late." As we walked to the door, Dominic placed his hand at the small of my back, a gesture that felt simultaneously protective and possessive. "The children will be completely secure," he assured me. "The entire property is locked down." "I know," I said, surprised to realize I meant it. Whatever else Dominic might be, his commitment to security was absolute. The car waiting for us was not the usual SUV, but a sleek armored limousine. Reynolds held the door as we slid into the leather interior. "Vincent Cardano will arrive with his wife and daughter," Dominic explained as we pulled away from the mansion. "Anthony will not be there. Too volatile for a public event. I have arranged for our tables to be adjacent. And what exactly am I supposed to do?" I asked, still unclear on my role beyond ornamental accompaniment. Dominic's hand came to rest on mine, his thumb tracing small circles against my skin. "Be yourself. Intelligent, observant, the devoted caretaker of my son." His eyes held mine. The woman who has captured my complete attention. The intensity in his gaze made me look away first. "I am not sure I know how to play that role convincingly." "It is not a role, Emma." His voice dropped to that intimate register that always affected me so deeply. "It is the truth. You have become essential to my household, to my life." Before I could formulate a response, the privacy screen lowered slightly. "Sir," Reynolds called from the front, "we are being followed. 2 vehicles, maintaining distance." Dominic's expression hardened instantly as he reached inside his jacket. With horror, I realized he was checking a concealed weapon. "Stay on the planned route," he commanded. "Our guards at the perimeter are in position," Reynolds confirmed. I stared at Dominic, my heart racing. "You expected this?" "I anticipated all possibilities," he corrected, his free hand seeking mine again. "Do not worry. This is merely Anthony making his presence known. He will not risk moving against us tonight, not with his father at the event." The casual way he discussed potential violence should have terrified me. Instead, I found myself drawing strength from his absolute confidence, from the methodical way he managed threats. "When did this become my life?" I murmured half to myself. Dominic's expression softened marginally. "The moment Marco chose you. Some connections are inevitable, Emma. Destined." The Westlake Foundation Gala was being held at the city's most prestigious hotel, its ballroom transformed into a glittering showcase of wealth and influence. As we entered, heads turned, not with the obvious curiosity of gossip, but with the careful assessment of people who understood power dynamics. Dominic moved through the crowd with practiced ease, his hand never leaving the small of my back, introducing me to business associates, politicians, and judges with the simple phrase, "This is Emma Carter." No explanation of my role or title, a deliberate ambiguity that everyone seemed to interpret as significant. I was acutely aware that this public appearance marked a transition, Tomorrow, my name would be linked with Dominic Salvatore in the society pages and private conversations. Any pretense that I was merely his son's caretaker or business assistant would be gone. Vincent Cardano has arrived, Dominic murmured close to my ear, nodding toward the entrance where an elderly man with silver hair was escorting an elegant woman in her 60s. He looks less intimidating than I expected, I observed quietly. Most dangerous men do, Dominic replied. Remember that Vincent's traditional appearance masks a man who once eliminated an entire rival family in a single night. A chill ran through me at the casual reference to mass murder. It was a stark reminder of the world I had entered. A world where such actions were business decisions rather than atrocities. Shall we greet our neighbors? Dominic suggested, guiding me toward the Cardano's table. Vincent Cardano looked up as we approached, his weathered face revealing nothing as he rose to his feet. Dominic, he acknowledged with a slight nod. Vincent, Dominic replied with equal formality. Allow me to introduce Emma Carter. The older man's sharp eyes assessed me thoroughly. Miss Carter. He gestured to the woman beside him. My wife, Sophia. Sophia Cardano nodded regally, her expression revealing nothing of her thoughts. A pleasure to meet you both, I said, summoning every ounce of poise I possessed. Please join us for a moment, Vincent invited, gesturing to the empty chairs at their table. As we sat, I felt the weight of unspoken tensions between the men. This was not a social exchange, but a carefully choreographed diplomatic meeting between powers. Your son has been busy lately, Dominic observed. His tone was conversational, though his eyes remained hard. Vincent's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. Young men often act impulsively without proper consideration. Impulsive actions can have permanent consequences, Dominic replied mildly. A heavy silence fell over the table. I glanced at Sophia Cardano, finding her watching me with surprising intensity. How old is your daughter, Miss Carter? She asked suddenly. The question caught me off guard. Lily is 7. Sophia nodded thoughtfully. Children change everything, do they not? Suddenly, the future extends beyond our own lifetimes. Her words carried weight beyond their surface meaning, a philosophical observation wrapped in what felt like a message. They deserve a peaceful world to grow up in, I replied carefully. Vincent Cardano's gaze shifted to me with new interest. Indeed they do, Miss Carter. A world of order and respect rather than chaos. I could not agree more, Dominic interjected smoothly, his hand finding mine under the table and squeezing gently. Approval. The conversation continued for several minutes, seemingly innocuous discussions of the charity's work, the unseasonably warm weather, and the quality of the champagne. Yet beneath every exchange lay coded messages about territories, respect, and consequences. As we rose to return to our table, Vincent addressed Dominic directly. I believe we understand each other. I believe we do, Dominic confirmed. I trust our understanding will be communicated effectively. Vincent's weathered face revealed a flicker of something. Resignation, perhaps. Family is everything, Dominic. We agree on that at least. As we walked away, Dominic's posture relaxed incrementally. That went well, he murmured. Did it? I asked, confused by the cryptic exchange. I could barely follow what was really being said. His lips curved in a slight smile. Vincent will rein in Anthony. He recognized that I have too much to lose to allow his son's provocations to go unchallenged, and that challenging me would cost him dearly. Because of Marco, I surmised. Because of all of you, Dominic corrected. A man with a family has everything to lose, which paradoxically makes him more dangerous to cross. Vincent understands this calculation better than his son. The remainder of the evening passed in a blur of superficial conversations and meaningful glances. Dominic never strayed from my side, his attentiveness sending a clear message to everyone present about my significance in his life. By the time we left, I was exhausted from maintaining the delicate balance of poise and vigilance the evening had required. In the privacy of the limousine, I slipped off my heels with a sigh of relief. You were perfect, Dominic said, loosening his bow tie. Sophia Cardano was particularly impressed. She seemed to be sending some kind of message, I observed. Dominic nodded. She was. Sophia has always been the true power behind Vincent, the voice of reason and strategy. Her approval of you was significant. Her approval of me as what exactly? I asked, finally addressing the question that had hovered between us all evening. Dominic's dark eyes held mine in the dimly lit interior. As the woman at my side, the one who cares for my son, the one whose presence has transformed my household, he reached across to tuck a stray strand of hair behind my ear, his fingers lingering against my cheek. The one I will not allow anyone to threaten. The possessive declaration should have alarmed me. Instead, I found myself leaning into his touch, the events of the evening, having stripped away the last of my pretenses. This is not the life I imagined, I said softly. Is it better or worse? He asked, his voice equally soft. I considered the question seriously. My previous life had been a constant struggle for survival, working multiple jobs, worrying about bills, raising Lily alone, but it had been simple, uncomplicated by the dangerous world Dominic inhabited. It is more, I answered finally. More everything, more security, more danger, more complexity, more feeling, he added, his hand moving to cup my face. The truth of his statement resonated through me. Whatever had developed between us over these weeks was more intense than anything I had experienced before. A connection forged in the unique circumstances of our arrangement, but growing into something neither of us had anticipated. When his lips met mine, it felt inevitable, the culmination of weeks of tension and growing attachment. The kiss was neither gentle nor tentative, but possessive and certain, as if claiming something that was already his. I responded with equal intensity, weeks of suppressed attraction finally breaking free. His arms pulled me closer, eliminating the space between us, as the kiss deepened. When we finally separated, both slightly breathless, his eyes had darkened to obsidian. "I told you it was not a role," he murmured. The car slowed as we approached the mansion gates. Reality intruded on the moment as I straightened my dress, and Dominic composed himself, both of us returning to our public personas. The house was quiet when we entered, the security team acknowledging Dominic with respectful nods as we passed. Mrs. Marino met us in the foyer, confirming that both children had gone to bed without incident. "Good night, Mrs. Marino." Dominic dismissed her with unusual gentleness. "Get some rest." As she departed, we stood alone in the vast entrance hall, the evening's events hanging between us, along with the memory of that kiss in the car. "We should talk about what happens next," I said finally. Dominic studied me for a long moment. "Yes," he agreed, "but not tonight. Tonight, I want you to think about what you truly want, Emma. For yourself. For Lily. For us." "Us," I repeated, testing the word. "Us," he confirmed, his voice leaving no room for doubt. "The children. You and me. This family we have created." He stepped closer, his hands coming to rest at my waist. "I never expected you, Emma Carter. You walked into my office for a job interview and instead reshaped my entire world." His expression was more open than I had ever seen it. "I do not do anything halfway. You should know that by now. Once I decide something or someone belongs to me, I commit absolutely. I do not belong to anyone," I countered, though without heat. A smile touched his lips. "Do you not?" He leaned forward, pressing a gentle kiss to my forehead. "Go check on the children. Get some rest. Tomorrow will define what this is becoming." As I made my way upstairs, I paused at Marco's room first, opening the door silently to check on him. He slept peacefully, his collection of special rocks arranged precisely on the nightstand beside him. Across the hall, Lily was equally peaceful, her arms wrapped around the new stuffed orca Marco had given her after their marine documentary marathon. In the quiet darkness, watching these two children who had formed such an unlikely bond, I acknowledged the truth I had been avoiding. We had already become a family, not by blood or by law, but through the complex web of needs, protection, and growing love that had entangled us all. Dominic Salvatore had entered our lives like a force of nature, powerful and unstoppable. He had offered security in exchange for connection, and protection in exchange for presence. Along the way, those transactions had transformed into something more genuine, something that looked remarkably like love, albeit a love complicated by power dynamics and dangerous realities. Tomorrow would bring difficult conversations and necessary boundaries. There would be terms to negotiate and expectations to manage. Dominic's world would always contain elements of danger and darkness that would require careful navigation. Tonight, in the peaceful quiet of the sleeping household, I allowed myself to imagine a future. Lily and Marco grew up as siblings, and the tentative connection between Dominic and me developed into something lasting. The security and stability he offered became the foundation for something genuine and deep. It was not the life I had planned, but as I closed my eyes, I realized it was the one I wanted.